Good morning, bore da. You're now listening in to the Staff Ideas Shared Learning webinar. Bore da, croeso cynnes I chi. Rydych chi'n gwrando mewn i'r Gweminar dysgu reini ar syniadau staff. What I'd like to do now is just double check that everyone doesn't have any problems with their sound. So you should see a slide that shows you how to talk you through if there is any issues with sound. Obviously, if you can hear me, there's not a problem at all. I'm just going to stay silent for a couple of minutes just for you to take down this information, and then we'll commence with the webinar. Okay, good morning. My name's Ina Lloyd. I'm from the Good Practice team of the Wales Audit Office. You are listening in to the Staff Ideas Shared Learning webinar. What I'd like to share with people, a couple of housekeeping points, if that's okay, before we actually kick off with the webinar. We've had a number of emails asking whether we record the webinar. We do, and we record it into small sound bites of about 10 to 15 minutes so people can listen to particular elements of the webinar at their convenience. We've also received quite a few questions in advance from people who cannot attend today or listen in, so we'll share them as we go along. However, when it comes to questions, we would really encourage you to share any questions you may be asking, because if you're thinking about that question, I'm sure other people will be as well. And I'd like to reassure people that questions, we're only interested in your questions. I don't sort of share who the question's coming from. It's more important about the question. So there'll be 4 opportunities for you to ask questions, but please feel free to send in or email your questions as they come up. And then at the end of each section, I'll try and group them together if that's okay. You should be seeing a slide now on your screen that shows you the kind of ways that we'll be sharing this information. On our website, we will tweet out different sections of the webinar in its entirety and in parts of it. We will blog about the webinar as well, and we'll also be doing video stories of the actual webinar as well. So, without further ado, I'd now like to introduce you to our panel. Can I first start with Chris Bolton? Chris?
Hello, yes, I'm Chris Bolton. I'm from the Wales Audit Office Good Practice team. Very
welcome. Good morning, Chris.
Hi there, my name's Lucy Youssef, and I work for Ideas UK as the
You're very welcome, Susie.
Hi, I'm Beth, and I work for wnaeth. I'm representing the All Wales Continuous Improvement Community. We're a group of people working in all aspects of public service and shared learning.
Croeso ti, Steph.
Diolch.
Good morning, I'm Stuart Lawes. I work for the Ministry of Defence, where I'm the Ideas Manager. So I'm responsible for the strategy and direction for Ideas throughout the MOD, and I'm also the MOD's representative within Ideas UK.
So that's our panel for today. You're all very, very welcome. Before we kick off with a question, I'd like to turn to Chris, if that's okay, and say, what's the story behind the webinar? Why did we decide to hold this webinar today?
Okay, well, listen, it's International Ideas Week, really important week. We've been involved in it in the past with Ideas UK, who we worked with for quite a number of years, and seen just how effective staff ideas are in helping businesses function better. As part of what we do in the Wales Audit Office, the good practice element is sharing ideas. What we've learned from Ideas UK, just how useful this is. So taking part in International Ideas Week, bringing together a panel of experts who've got so much experience around how you capture staff ideas, how you put them into action, is really quite exciting. And to share this across the listening is a really positive thing we can be part of.
Yes, thank you. Okay, without further ado then, I'd like to kick off with the first question. So it's about why is it important? What's important about the staff ideas, Chris? Can I come to you first, if that's okay?
Okay, two quite straightforward things here. They don't seem very technical, but it's the idea of many hands make light work. That if you're in a small organisation or a large organisation, there are people there who have things to say. And it's the many hands make light work. Get their ideas and engage in what you're doing. The other part of it is what I think is quite important. There's not always one best answer. and the people who work within your organisation will see different things, so it's really important to capture that. And ideas schemes, asking the people who are involved, is a really effective way of doing that. So quite simple things, many hands make light work, and there's not always one best answer. Go out and find out.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Sophie, I'd like to move on to you now in terms of, it's International Ideas Week this week, yeah, and we are contributing towards it with this webinar. Yeah. Where do you sit on in terms of the importance of engaging with staff?
Well, I think in order to, coming to the points that I've made, to help improve productivity and efficiency within your organisation. So if you think about the people that work within your organisation, who's going to know more than them? And really it's about trying to gather those ideas to improve the efficiency of your company, your organisation. And really, as opposed to going and seeking outside help, you've got a wealth of knowledge sitting right within your own organisation, so utilise it. Gather those ideas and see what you can do to increase efficiencies and productivity within your organisation. I think that's really one of the main gather ideas from staff.
Sophie, thank you.
You're welcome.
Steph, can I move on to you now? So in terms of wearing your hat as the All Wales Continuous Improvement community, where do you sit on in terms of the importance of engaging with staff?
Well, as Sophie said, staff are best placed to know what changes need to be done. They're at the core face. They're an invaluable source of knowledge about all aspects of their job. Staff do the work, so they know what works, but more importantly, what doesn't work. But offering up the opportunity for staff to suggest and create change also gives them ownership of change. Good or bad, however it goes, the change will have been there.
Thank you for that, Steph. Finally, Stuart, so Minister of Defence, quite a varied organisation. What's the importance of staff to you?
It's mostly about the engagement. So we're quite fortunate in that most, if not all, of our staff are exceptionally professional, particularly the uniform guards. They are on the ground, they use the kit every day, they're the people best placed to identify where things don't work, particularly in the conflict areas between the black and white when things change over. And more importantly, if you listen to them, you start to build that trust between management and employee, and without that trust, you don't have engagement.
So I'm hearing trust is a key word that seems to be coming out, and sort of listening to what the staff have. That's the key messages I'm getting from the first part of our panel questions. I've had one question actually come in already. It's to do with culture. Where does culture fit into all this? I think I'd like to direct that at Stuart, if that's okay. So there's a couple of questions. So if I give you an overarching question, I'd say, where does culture fit into all of this?
So culture is your bedrock of any change process or engagement activity. You have to understand the culture of your organisation in order to leverage the true benefits of what you're trying to do. Don't try and change it too quickly. Just leverage what's already there.
Chris, can I get you to respond to that question as well?
Stuart picked up on some of the things at that point about listening. There's a bit about any organisation that talks about you've got to listen to what people say, but then listening is only one part of it. The next bit is taking action. Let's say it's fine to listen, but being seen to take action on what's happened, and that in my experience in looking at some ideas schemes, is good at listening and collecting the information, but then the action's not so visible. And I think that's one of the big areas I've seen where idea schemes don't work as well as they can, and that visibility of taking action, and those two things need to go together. And showing people what you've done, ideas they put forward. So I'm going to tell you what my idea is to improve. I'd like you to pay some attention, and even if you don't like it, tell me. Just don't let it disappear into a black hole.
That's a powerful message, that fact about sort of listen, share, and learn. There's a powerful message coming through there. Okay, thank you for that, folks. I'd like to move on to the second question now, if I may. So the second question is based on about the methods, I'm sure it's not a one-size-fits-all approach here. So, Chris, can I start off with you, if that's okay? What methods do you use, do you subscribe to?
Through some of the things you've done, I've got experience of working in different organisations with a number of ideas schemes, and there's an opportunity to tell you about some of the things that don't work. And it's interesting, culture was mentioned earlier, and in some organisations, certain things don't work. I've been in organisations where we had the sort of mechanical slips that were written on, and they didn't work for various reasons. Different organisations, the one where I come back to, currently I work in a relatively small organisation. There are only about 250 of us. There's opportunity with that low number to actually almost know everybody. And where I am at the moment, what I would prefer, I call them action workshops, but it's the notion if we need something, we need to sort of generate ideas, it's better to bring the people together and draw it out in a workshop environment, because I think there's something about critical mass, and perhaps Stuart and Sophie can cover this in a moment, but if you've got a big organisation, there's enough coming through to keep systems moving. When there's a small number, you don't have that critical mass of things moving through the process. So for us at the moment, I think it's working better where we've got an issue, we come together in a workshop and resolve them and draw out ideas that way, and that seems to work better than trying to create a system where there's not enough flow. I mean, perhaps you may be able to comment on that in a moment, but that seems small organisations, formal system, difficult. That's sort of where we are. The other bit we are trying at the moment around that is the substitute for the sort of formal system is, if you like, social media. It's spoken about in a lot of organisations. When Sophie worked for HSBC, you had a social media process, which were in, was it only 30,000, 300?
Gosh, yeah, it was a very, very big organisation, because we dealt with questions coming in all over the UK from employees and Europe as well.
So 100,000?
Yeah, it was just, it's a very large number.
We're much smaller, so we're using something called Yammer to try and gather those ideas, and you capture the conversation around it, that you put something out and generate the ideas and see what's happening. And so that's where we're trying at the moment. Having tried formal systems in the past, didn't quite work for us, seen other people try things, we're doing the action workshop type approach and an element around Yammer social media.
Chris, I'll come back to you in a minute, because I'm having quite a few questions coming in about what Yammer is. So I'll give you time to think about what you need to respond to that one. So, Sophie, in terms of Ideas UK, what methods have you seen? Have you gathered? What methods do you sort of, do you subscribe to?
Well, I think building on what Chris has said, it really does depend on the need of your organisation. Every organisation is different. You're going to be looking at some that have huge numbers and some that don't have as many. So I think really figuring out what the need of your organisation is the most important thing, because it's only once you realise that you will be able to build a scheme that actually works. So whereas when, like Chris said, when I was working for HSBC, we had an in-house online database, people submitting their ideas, we used social media aspects, there was a lot going on, but obviously because we had such a huge base, something like that wouldn't have worked in a 250-man operation like where Chris was working, so for him, having the action workshops work better. So I think it's really important to establish the need, and going back to, like I said, my HSBC days, we did have an online scheme that was all run in-house, and having it run in-house just makes it a bit more easier to control, so that's the method we use.
So I'm getting a message, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Okay. Steph, can I come to you in terms of what approaches are you seeing in the All Wales Continuous Improvement community?
Well, it follows in from what you said and what everybody else has said. There's a variety of methods to choose from, and they all work if staff are properly engaged. You can have anything from a staff involved in full-time change projects or programs down to very simple suggestion box ideas. But what I found is important in any method that we use is that we have senior leader or senior management buy-in. Staff need to see there's commitment from the top of the organisation in this change, and they need to feel supported in bringing forward ideas and be supported if they're piloting any changes. So senior leader engagement is very important.
Thank you. Stuart, the Army, it's quite a disparate organisation. People are all over the world, so sort of in the Ministry of Defence. So how does that happen in, sort of trying to engage with that kind of scenario?
I think probably the first thing, as everyone sort of alluded to, is there's no silver bullet. The correct solution varies from organisation to organisation. For us in the Ministry of Defence, I spent a fair bit of time developing an ideas management strategy, and as Steph's pointed out, I'm quite fortunate in that the Ministry of Defence's Permanent Secretary and the Chief of Defence Staff are both regular visitors to my desk. They're very engaged with the scheme. They do everything which they can, but it allows me to make sure that the strategy combines continuous improvement, good practice, organisational learning from experience, all of those good things, which ties it all together. The RAF in particular are very much ahead of the game when it comes to the different parts of the MOD, in that their continuous improvement teams have already spotted the synergy between ideas schemes and continuous improvement activities. They work together in a sort of symbiotic relationship. The Navy are playing catch up on that at the moment, and they've just taken our ideas scheme into their continuous improvement team, and then they'll be running across the Royal Navy as well. So it's all about that level of understanding and pulling it all into where it best sits to get the most benefit.
Sharing the learning from previous. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Can I say thank you for all your questions? We're getting quite a few questions coming through. So we've got a couple of questions coming through about sort of does idea schemes and continuous improvement, can they coexist? Steph, I'll come to you on that one in a minute, if I may. But Chris, we're having quite a few questions about Yammer. Let's take it back to what is Yammer first?
Okay, Yammer, all it is a platform for sharing information. It's a bit like Facebook that people use within the organisation. Why it's appealing to lots of organisations is you can put it within your own IT systems, so it's not exposed to the outside world. As with Facebook and things like that, how it operates is people start conversations, and what it means is the conversation is open for other people to see. So unlike things like, there's loads and loads of things in organisations that go on in email. Brilliant knowledge exchange will go on email, but that will only work with the people who are connected to that email list. With the Yammer or whatever, so there are other things available, I should say. With other Yammer and platforms like that, you've got the conversations open to anyone to join in, and it's interesting. I've run some little sort of observations of things that I've seen going on. You drop an idea in, and you watch people join the conversation. And that's great. And I'm
literally just going to add on to that, because in our HSBC days, what we used to find was when somebody submitted an idea, having that social media aspect meant that actually they would shape the idea with their comments, and sometimes they would, show you where there were faults within the idea and actually start building on. So you'd actually get this one idea and 10 comments down. It could be going on a completely different tangent, or it could have just been closed down altogether. So I
saw the HSBC one where there were opportunities to vote up and vote down.
Yeah, we did that
and,
as well.
And it's a bit like people, it's called micro-participation in the world of Facebook. Yeah. But people voting things up and down. Dell Ideastorm is a great example of this. The more votes that people give something, that idea's probably got some life.
Yeah.
And going right back to that very thing about the people who are in the organisation probably know what's going on. Yeah. They're probably the best people to vote things up and down.
So what I'd like to say to people listening in terms of information regarding Yammer, we'll make sure we'll share some of the internal comms approaches that people are taking. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but just for people to be aware as examples how it's been used, if that's all right.
There's a blog on the Ideas UK site about the use of HSBC social media.
Yeah, we can definitely get the link to that over to you.
Thank you very much.
Available.
Steph, can I come to you now about, it says, one of the questions that we've had in is to do about sort of whether continuous improvement and idea scheme, can they coexist?
Well, so simply, yes, they can coexist, because if we're looking at continuous improvement, as we've said, who's best to ask and who's best to involve with the staff through suggestion schemes and ideas.
Thank you for that. Stuart, there's a couple of other questions that we've had coming in about how can we eradicate killer phrases that can kill ideas off in infancy. We've tried that before. There's no money. We need to make sure that ideas have legs. All those kind of phrases. So, can I come to you with that? Because I'm sure with the experience that you've had in the Ministry of Defence, that it's probably something you've seen quite a lot before.
It is. As much as I'd like to eradicate those comments, it's not really possible. So the one thing you really have to do is manage expectations right from the word go. what I do with the MOD's thing is I have a list on our intranet of all of the suggestions, whether they were successfully implemented or not, and what the outcome was, so that all of our staff can go to that page, they can look at what's previously been submitted, whether it's implemented or not, and that sort of helps with that one as well. We also have a page which looks at frequently rejected ideas and the reason why those ideas are rejected.
It's very open and very transparent.
Yep.
Is there any way we could share some of those to share with people? Because obviously, if people are sending questions about this, they're obviously potentially having issues with it. Are we able to share some of this information?
I can have a look at it, and some of the bits which I can share, I'll share. If it's not, then just the approach.
Sure. I'm talking about the approach, yeah, just to be clear. Thank you for that, Stuart. We've had quite a few questions in about does an ideas management strategy contain, I'm trying to read, we haven't got all the questions coming through. Somebody sent a question in regarding what does an ideas management strategy contain. I think that's a full question. Yes, it is. So can I come back to you, Stuart, on that question? But Chris, can you back that one up afterwards, if that's okay? Thank you.
Yeah, so an ideas management strategy is how you as an organisation approach the collection, assessment, implementation and feedback of ideas. So for us within the Ministry of Defence, that starts with a baseline of learning from experience, organisational learning, lessons identified, which is a very deliberate term, continuous improvement, the idea scheme, whether it's a 24/7 or campaign basis or whatever it happens to be. I run a hybrid, so 24/7, it's open for everybody, and I have a cloud-based system to collect those ideas and also provide continual feedback. So everyone who's submitted an idea can log on to the system at any time from any device and see where it is in the process. And we also have the capability to run specific campaigns. So any business unit can run a campaign through the system as well. How that all then ties into good practice or best practice, depending on your semantic preference, and then the more traditional innovation bits and pieces. So how you as an organisation drive internal innovation, or how you respond to innovation, you've got no control over.
Thank you for that, Stuart. Thanks very much. Sophie, have we got examples of some strategies that we could share with people following this webinar? We could send links to them of different approaches, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy to get that.
Lovely. We need to move on to the next question, but I'm aware that there's several questions coming in about how do you mix the engagement process between online and offline. Sophie, I'll come back to you that shortly, but we need to move on to the next question, if that's all right.
Yes, sure.
Thank you. So if we move to the third question now, it's all about what about the benefits. So, Chris, in your experience, what benefits have you seen from having a staff engagement staff ideas within an organisation?
Two things. One of them I touched on earlier, and it's this point of by spreading the net very widely, you get different points of view and views and experiences. And particularly with lots of things in public sector at the moment, there is no best way of doing things. Indeed, some of the best ways are the old ways, and we need different ways of doing things. And the idea scheme benefit is around actually you cast the net very widely and you pull together lots of different things, because that's really important at the moment. The comment has been made: if we continue to do the same things we've always done, we'll still get the same old results, and that need to be different, responding to different things. Big push. The second one is, and it's been touched on earlier, is about if you ask people and involve them, they feel part of the solution. And that's a bit about engaging people, and if you want to make something a success, you need to bring people in. And what better way than asking them what they think, what are their ideas to make things different. There's nothing worse than a top-down imposed, you will do it this way.
Thank you for that, Chris. Sophie, can I come to you?
Yes, sure. I think with regards to the benefit, your return on investment is going to be dependent on what you actually put into the scheme.
Yeah.
So, if you've got your correct processes in place, if you've got, like everyone's touched on it, having the right buy-in from your senior leadership team all the way down, it's really the benefits could be endless. It really does depend. I mean, again, it depends on why you brought a scheme in. What is it that you're looking to do with the scheme? So all of these things kind of come under, like we'd say, financial savings usually is a big one. How to save costs, how to increase finances, how to improve the customer experience, how to improve the employee experience, going back to productivity, efficiency. I mean, these are all of the benefits that you could look to get from having an idea scheme within your organisation, but depending on how you've actually set it up, how the processes are in place, what buy-in you've got will determine the benefit that you get out of it.
So I'm hearing from you that you need to have clarity right at the onset of why you're putting the scheme in. What's the purpose of it? So that has to be very clear.
It touches on what Stuart said about transparency, because I think having transparency there is so important, because I think a lot of people will feel demotivated by hearing the killer phrases of, you know, sorry, we can't do that, there's no money. But if you actually explain, you know, we've taken your idea on board, it's on our database, for example, you know, at a later stage, should we ever reinvestigate this area, we will take into consideration your idea. But for now, unfortunately, it's not something we can do. So again, you're telling them that you can't do it, but you're giving them a reason, you're letting them know that you've taken on board their idea, you've looked into it. You know, as long as there's that openness, I think you're going to have a lot more people accepting that there will be failures here and there. There won't always be, you know, the golden idea from the start, but you just keep at it, and you keep that openness and that transparency, and I think that will inspire people to actually put more in.
Thank you, Sophie.
No worries.
So, Steph, can I move on to you on this one, please?
Yes, certainly. For me, and my experience, it's all the illities. Sustainability, responsibility, accountability, acceptability, adaptability. It's all those kind of words.
I love that. I love that. It's lovely. It's really lovely.
If staff are central to changing the way they work and given opportunity to test new working practices, then they will be responsible for the change. They will become accountable for the change. They will adapt better to their change, what we're looking at. But staff, if they're also given the opportunity to grow their role and themselves, so it's things like more increased learning opportunities, increased challenges, increased networking opportunities. This all leads to increased morale, and that kind of morale is quite contagious.
Thank you for that. So Stuart, what's been the benefit for the Ministry of Defence of having your GEM scheme?
So I think we sort of touched on things already. When I took over the scheme, it was all about saving money. And to be frank, nobody likes saving their employer money. So the first things I did was switch it around so that the scheme became more about improving your experience in the workplace. So improve things to make your life easier to do your day-to-day job. As a result, we actually saved more money. As bizarre as that sounds.
That's brilliant.
So when I took over, we averaged about £9 million a year worth of savings. And last financial year, we were 41.5 million in combined cash and efficiency savings just through the idea of alone anything else we could do. So from a business point of view, can't really get much better than that.
Wow, that's pretty impressive, isn't it?
Can I ask, do you measure things like what's the return on investment there for the input of your team to run the scheme? What does it cost relative to what it then generates for the business financially?
So last year I spent £280,000 on the idea scheme for 41.5 million in savings.
That's not a bad return.
Somewhere around 175 to 1. And I think as Ideas UK, I think we say 3 to 1 is a good ratio.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously well.
That's a pretty impressive statistic. Thank you, Stuart. Can I say to folks who are listening in, many thanks for all your questions that come in. They're fabulous, and I don't ignore them, so I'm going to go on to the questions for now. So I asked Sophie earlier on about how do you mix an engagement process between online and offline. I'm looking for a fairly short answer, Sophie, but I'm sure we could send and provide lots of information following this event. But would you like to sort of just talk a little bit about, respond to that question?
So really, to get your guys engaged, I guess, you can use any avenue you want. If you wanted to go online, it could, again, comes down to your organisation. What is it that you need within your organisation? Is it a case that it would be better to go out and do marketing face-to-face, actually sitting down with people, making them aware of your scheme and getting people engaged that way and then directing them online? Or having a paper ballot sort of suggestion scheme and having an online database to keep all of the information? So I don't think it's a case of, you know, how do you mix it? It's just using whichever one suits you best. There's no set formula. There's never going to be a set formula. You just have to take what it is that you want from the idea scheme, how you can incorporate it within the culture of your organisation, and then finding out which processes will work best. Because even though it might seem as though offline would be better, you might find online works better. So you have to trial, you have to test, find out what it is that your employees want, and deliver that way.
If people are members of your organisation, can they come to you to see who and direct people to say, well, this is the approach that this organisation takes, and you could share ideas and approaches that way?
Well, that is essentially what Ideas UK does. So Ideas UK are a not-for-profit organisation. We put companies from both the public sector and the private sector in touch with each other to share best practice on how to run a successful scheme within your organisation. By becoming a member of Ideas UK, one of the benefits that you would get is that we are able to put you in touch with other members. So, for example, Stuart, who is with Ministry of Defence, Chris, obviously, with Wales Audit Office, we can send you to those organisations so that you're able to have a look and see what they're doing and how that might help your organisation. And then alongside doing that, we're able to give you guidance and provide training, and there's loads of other things that we can help you with. So it's all on our website, and the details, I believe, are on your site.
We'll signpost those up later.
That'd be great.
Thank you for that, Susie.
You're welcome.
Chris, I've got a couple of questions coming in, so about failure. And it says, as with all new things, some will inevitably fail. How do you increase people's appetite for failure? Now, we've had a few other questions, but that question kind of sums it up quite well. So can I come to you first, and then Zeph, if that's okay?
Okay, the failure is an interesting area. Working in the public sector, sort of failure isn't something that's hugely spoken about. I'm looking across at Stuart here, and Steph, that failure is something that we don't sort of talk about. Interestingly, one of the things from getting involved with Ideas UK, getting exposed to other organisations and some of the private sector, and actually it's an interesting, different view on it. And the notion that people talk about prototyping and testing. And I remember one visit we went on to a big manufacturing company, and they knew they had a problem to solve, and they set up perhaps a dozen prototypes to test what was going on and how. And loads of these failed, but that was fine, and it was part of the process, and it was okay because they knew each one they were learning from was getting them to the end point of solving the problem they had, and that was kind of part of how they worked. Well, you don't tend to see that in bits of public sector. You do things, and the one solution is pushed forward. And I think there's part of actually there's a notion. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but people say fail small and fail fast. But but actually what that means to me is you do things at a level where you test them and prototype them, and you do them quickly. But you expect things to fail, and that's okay. And that's as much as culture, as we talked about earlier, it's changing some of that expectation that if things go wrong, it's okay because it didn't cost us £1 million, and nobody got injured as a result. They were small things. There are certain things you've got to get right, but it's worth testing them at a little level. And the business about there's lots of things around this, but actually, if you've never failed on anything, when it does go wrong, it can be quite catastrophic. But if you're doing things where you're doing little things and learning and building up, that resilience, which is another word that's being used a lot at the moment, resilience starts to build up, and you can accept some of those things. That's my sort of take on it, which we boil it down into you do lots of little pilots at a small level and test them. And the ones that work, you lift up and amplify those. You learn the lessons. The ones that don't, you push them to one side, but you've learned they're valuable because you've learned something for them. And I think that business about stopping doing things is as big a question as continuing doing things. And I've learned such a lot from looking at some of the world of manufacturing and some of the Ideas UK. If I can mention people like Rico, who are up in Telford, fantastic, learned such a lot from how they trial things, and some of the other organisations, and bringing some of those lessons on board.
So I'm hearing failure is actually important because it's actually lessons learned, and lessons learned is invaluable.
Absolutely.
Steph, can I come to you on this one as well? If that's all right?
Yes, Cindy, because you said exactly what I was going to say. It's all about lessons learned. It's when you fail, what happened? Why did it go wrong? What can we do differently? But the important thing as well is going back to that top-down buy-in. It's a no-blame culture. It's about getting senior leaders to understand why we failed and that there was a process to go to, that we have to fail sometimes to get to the right place. That's similar to Ideas UK. That's with the All Wales Continuous Improvement community. We learn from each other. There are lots of organisations, public sector organisations in Wales that might have made those mistakes already.
Yes.
Go and talk to them, go and see what did they do wrong, and they'll help you perhaps not fail in your own organisation.
And that's the beauty of the All Wales Continuous Improvement community. They share amongst each other and say, we had a go at this, that bit worked, that didn't. That bit didn't work so well, and so it's sort of say, so I wouldn't do that for this reason type of thing. Okay.
Can I just interject on that point? There's a question up there about mixing online and offline, and just saying so online, what people put up is usually the glorious version of the perfect case study, and that's great because it gets you places, but offline, people tell you what really happened.
Right.
And I think that's why we really need to sort of have a mixture of the two, because that trust of people who tell you what didn't work and share some of those really good nuggets in the offline conversations.
Yeah. So I think probably what I've just remembered here is the chief executive of Startup did a talk a couple of years ago at an Ideas UK conference. And he talked about blue chip company to bust and back again. And he said one of their biggest learning points was that when you get it wrong, an individual will on average tell 9 people. But when you get it right, they'll only tell 3 people. And then from that, you can then extrapolate and you can work it all out. But from my point of view within the military defence, failure is not a bad thing. Failure is a learning experience.
Yeah, it's what you take from it.
Yeah. And our biggest problem in the public sector is actually the press and the way that failure in the public sector is reported. They don't share the view that failure is a good thing because they see it as you failed, therefore you wasted public money. And it's not that balanced reporting thing. It would be great if it was there, but that's a challenge. And that drives the behaviour across the public sector where we don't manage risk, we mitigate it to avoid those failures, and that just drives the perverse behaviour.
Yeah, it comes back to your trialling, doesn't it? But working on a smaller scale so that you don't have such a huge impact should there be a failure.
We've had a very interesting question come in about informal mechanisms. Relationships with line managers is key, and then the second part, how do you engage across 3 generations, the baby boomers, Generation X and Generation Y? Because obviously, I'm guessing, but the person who sent the question might need to clarify this. Obviously, the older the person is, the less likely they're going to be social media savvy, I'm guessing. But if this delegate would like to confirm, that'd be great. So, I guess they're alluding to saying that there mustn't be a one-size-fits-all. If you have an organisation that has a massive age range within the employees.
I was just going to say, because they've put there about the relationship with the line manager, going back to the offline-online, tying it in with that, having processes in place where you can suggest improvements through your line manager. So really it's a case of establishing, is my organisation predominantly made up of, Generation X or Generation Y? Does it skim across all 3? Because then you've got a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for, manoeuvrability, I'm thinking, that you can actually look at different ways to appeal to different people, because whereas your younger generation is probably going to be all up for social media and, those sort of aspects, your people that aren't really that, and that said, actually, there's a lot of young people probably that don't like social media anyway, so you've got to accommodate. You can't just tar everyone with the same brush. So I guess if you can really find a way to engage across the board.
Our delegate has come back and let us know. Thank you very much for that. So the question is about, it's not so much about social media, but understanding the different drivers for behavioural change across different generations. Thank you very much for that. So can I come to you first on this, Chris, and I'll come to you, Stuart, then, if that's all right.
Oh, you can do Stuart first.
Stuart first.
It's only because me and Chris have talked about this before. Yeah. And really the key is it's having different approaches, all running together lot of change activity, a lot of idea stuff that I don't actually know about until it's delivered, and I don't want to know about it, because quite frankly, that's down to individual teams to sort themselves out. We're all expected to have a continuous improvement attitude when we walk into the office, so if something needs to change, it changes. If I can change it, I change it. If I need to go to my line manager to get it changed, I can go and talk to my line manager. If I don't get a joy there, I go to my second reporting officer. If I need to go elsewhere, that's when the idea scheme comes in within the MOD, because the idea scheme takes the line manager out of the equation, and as an individual, it's submitted direct to the ideas program.
Ah, right. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you for that. Steph, there's a question that's coming in about where do staff ideas fit in with all the changes that's happening in Welsh public sector. So I'll give you a couple of minutes on that one to have a think about it. And then, but Chris, I'm going to come back to you to respond to Stuart in terms of about the question about the behavioural change across the different generations.
Well, behaviour change is such a difficult and complicated topic. From the little bits I've been involved in this, as Stuart's saying, there are many different things for different groups. And how people perceive them. It's not just an age demographic thing, it's from where people come from, what the culture of their particular organisation is, and you have to adapt those, and that's the clever bit. You need to understand about what do these people need and want, and getting in under the skin of that, and different approaches. And if they say, coming back to some of the discussion earlier, there's not a one-size-fits-all on any of this. There are multiple approaches, all going on at the same time, but hopefully pointing in the same direction. And some, as Stuart said, you might not even know about some of the improvements or idea things that are happening, but the fact they're happening is a good thing. That people are doing the right thing. And I acknowledge you as well, you're not going to capture everything.
No, fair comment, very fair comment. Okay, thank you for that. Steph, I'm going to come to you on that killer question, if I may. So I'll just give you the question again, if I may. Where do staff ideas fit in with all the changes that's going to be happening in Welsh public sector?
With all these changes proposed from public sector, it's more important than ever to include staff in the change process. There may be changes like integration of services, integration of systems that need a bottom-up as well as a top-down approach. So transition to and buy-in to these changes will be much easier if staff are fully involved. And I can fly the flag for the continuous improvement community again, is that a lot, well, I think practically all local authorities, most of the health boards are involved in the community. So we do have that knowledge of each other's working arrangements. Perhaps that gives us a bit of a head start.
Stuart, I'd like to come to you in Ministry of Defence, because over the last few years, the Ministry of Defence as an organisation has changed beyond any recognition. So share your journey with us. What's happened over the last 5-8 years?
Okay, so we had Defence Transformation, which was the largest change programme in the public sector Europe-wide. And I was fortunate enough to be part of the team that delivered that. So I had the work strand all about ideas management, strangely enough. And that allowed me to drive a lot of these things. So one of the drivers in Lord Levine was about culture and behaviour and buy-in. And the understanding by senior management that those things weren't going to change overnight was probably the most important lesson from the whole activity. Behaviour and culture change takes between 5 and 10 years.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So culture and behaviour change takes between 5 and 10 years to achieve. So we've started stuff over the last few years where we don't expect to see the change until those junior officers have gone through staff college last year, until they take up senior posts, and they won't take up those senior posts for another 5 or 6 years. It's only then that the work we put into changing those courses in the last couple of years will actually come to fruition.
Wow.
So it's a long game.
I think that's really setting expectations and being realistic, because if it's going to take that long to see whether change is, you want to set people's expectation from the start, I guess.
And it's a really hard message for senior managers, because obviously they're only in post for 3 to 4 years in the public sector. They want to leave their mark behind, and convincing some of our senior managers that they're going to put things in motion which aren't going to necessarily be accredited to them was a really hard sell from the transformation team.
So what made the difference? How did you get them on board? Because if you're in that sort of in-between period of sort of, year 1 to year 8 and the changes haven't been made yet, you've not got there, how do you manage to keep everyone on board?
It's breaking everything down. So there are quick wins. There are always quick wins. So it's focusing on the quick wins, making sure you're clear with everybody about what the short, medium or long-term plan is and where the benefits fall in. And then the regular benefits tracking. We do a 6-monthly survey out to our key areas which we're delivering change for us to see how they're getting on, whether things are still on target, where we are now. So even though the programme has formally closed, the benefits activity still continues and is still being reported.
Thank you, Stuart. Several people are emailing in about wanting to contact the panel members following the webinar. We'll ensure that all their contact details will be shared with you following this webinar, and also as part of our the MP3 files, all that details will be on them when we tweet them out as well. Stuart, thank you for that. That's fascinating. Chris, can I come to you about this question? We've got a couple of other questions coming in as well, and related to what you're saying, Stuart, so I'll come back to you in a minute if I may. So in terms of, sort of where the staff ideas fit in with all the changes that's going to happen in Welsh public sector, how do you see the role of staff ideas fitting in?
I think we see a lot of it already, but there's listening going on, there are people ask questions, there are consultation processes. So it's taking that a bit further and just casting the net wider. But coming back to something we said earlier, it's then what happens next. It's all very well to ask some of those questions, but then what happens next? And if you're like closing the loop, as Stuart described about the someone mentioned what's an ideas management strategy. Well, there's that point, get the ideas, great, ask people, appraise them, do something with them, but to feedback. And there's nothing worse than leaving that gap of not letting people know what's happened with their ideas. In terms of where we're going over the next few years here, I think that's quite a critical thing about just close that loop, involve people, but if you're going to involve them, and let them know what's been the result of involving them.
I'm getting a very clear message from all 4 panels of the importance of coming back to staff and feeding back to them on a continual basis. This isn't a one-off. You haven't fed back once. It's ongoing. That's one of the clearest messages I'm hearing from you 4. Thank you for that, folks. There's a couple of other questions coming in. We'll take a few more questions before we move on to the last question. So it's a supplementary question to you, Stuart, if I may. How do you go about measuring progress with culture change?
That's a good question.
It is a really good question. I'm sorry I didn't give you time to prepare for it. They're coming in thick and fast. This is really a live webinar, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's not easy, but it comes back to my first point where I said that you have to understand the culture of your organisation. If you don't understand your starting point, then you've got no reference to see how your proposed changes and desired changes are actually starting to embed in the organisation. For us, the easiest indication is really looking at the different sort of models out there. So are you filing things correctly in line with the policy? So we can obviously go to our IT teams, and where the shared services are being used for collaboration, we can see how much more data traffic is going through those servers, whether the SharePoint servers are being used correctly, whether there's further intervention needed on there. When it comes to the military guys going through staff college, those who are being promoted quickly, we can then obviously do interventions with them and see whether they're taking that learning into their new post, or whether they're just reverting to form of the people they've taken out from who didn't benefit from that initial learning.
Stuart, thank you. I'd just like to say to everyone listening in, we'll keep track of all your questions. If we haven't managed to get round to all of you today, we'll ensure that we get responses out to those questions and share them with everyone, if that's okay.
Can I just make an point that say the MOD went through the biggest public sector change management ever
in Europe.
In Europe. So the lessons that have come out of that and what you're still doing, there's got to be some extensive learning that we could draw from what's happened over the last 5 or 6 years there.
Yeah, I think we've got a trying to think of the right terms that everyone understands, a grade 7.
Yeah.
that mean the
civil servants will get
yeah?
that? Yeah.
So we've got a grade 7 desk officer who is responsible for tracking the benefits and things. So I can put you in touch with her, and she'll be able to answer the
That'd
question.
be brilliant. We'll make sure that that's shared. Thank you for that. Thanks for that, Chris. Chris, can I come to you now for the final question? It's about what advice would you give to anyone who's thinking about starting a staff idea scheme?
Okay, 2 things I've got here. One is go small.
Yeah.
And
you've talked about this before, haven't you?
And having spent time with Ideas UK and seen lots of organisations, and the ones that I think were the most successful on this had small things happening. And if you like, these are the things that kept the engine running. And when the engine's running, when the big things come in, you've got more capacity to deal with those. And I keep, it's okay to mention Rico here, that's one of my favourite place. that you go along and how they deal with it, and the ideas that came through their staff, small things, but the power they had, they accumulated to so much, and they drove the engine, and that kept going. And I'd say, if anyone's going to do anything, concentrate on getting that bit right, because then the bigger things will follow on. And the second one is about build on things that work, but this bit where they don't work, be okay to sort of stop doing them. And that fits in around some of the stuff around the failure element. If it's not working, stop it. Not just, and there's the sort of, I say, frog in the dead horse analogy, but stop doing some of these things.
Have you had experience of seeing people continuing with the sort of project that don't work because they feel they don't want it, because it's their baby and they don't want to sort of see it fail?
I might have.
What's that about? How do you overcome that issue? Seriously, now, though.
I think that's a really difficult, and I think that goes back to the little bits about being prepared to prototype. An example, one of my sons is working in, he's doing a degree in product design. They design things, and I was sat looking at all these beautiful little models he'd made about his product he was designing. And so that's the one we're doing. He said, what's happening to these? Are they going in the bin? I said, what? The effort you said, well, that's just the way it is. We've designed them, we've appraised them. This is the one we're taking forward. These have got no, we've learned what we can, they've got no use. I've not got room to put them on the shelf. So they're off for recycling. And that notion of, you park these things, put them away. We've learned, we've taken what value we can from them. And that's an interesting analogy. I was quite upset seeing these beautifully crafted things. I think I can put it on my shelf in the house to gather dust, but it wasn't.
So I'm taking from you, Chris, it's about being upfront right at the beginning of saying, we're trying these out for a limited period, and we will not take everything forward. That's kind of what I'm gleaning from what you're saying, yeah?
And that business, because that comes back to the multiple options, find out what works, amplify that. What doesn't work, learn the lessons, and then you leave them behind, because and in an extent your scheme has got a pile of things, an archive, Stuart, of things that didn't work, isn't it? Yeah. Which is,
so it's about signposting, you're saying, and just saying, we're going to try all these, but we're not going to take all of them forward. It's about signposting right at the beginning.
People get emotionally connected to their idea.
Okay, thank you very much. That's lovely. Thank you. Sophie, can I come to you with a question? So what do you think, what advice would you like to share with people listening in today?
I would like to advise you all to do the right research to establish the needs for your organisation. Understand the culture, like Stuart's already said, understanding the culture of your organisation is going to help you to decide what you're going to actually put in place. Are you going to put in an online scheme? Are you going to do it offline? Are you going to combine the both of them? So yeah, do the right research and have the right processes in place, because the thing is that it's all good and well having a suggestion scheme, but if you don't set out expectations of we will get a response to you within 4 weeks of you putting an idea in, again, setting expectations, making sure that the ideas are being looked at properly by somebody who's not going to be biased. You need somebody who's quite objective, and having the right buy-in from the organisation, not just from senior management, from middle management, having the buy-in from your employees as well, because they're the ones that are going to be giving you the ideas. So really making sure that the whole organisation is buying into the scheme, knowing that the scheme is there, promoting it well, that is really what I would say. And, have a look around, look and see what other companies are doing. As good as it is to be involved with Ideas UK and us do that for you, you're still in a position where you can contact other companies and say, look, we're doing this. Have you done something like it? Don't be afraid to ask, because at the end of the day, what's worked for someone might not work for you, but it might be the thing that you need. So if you don't ask, you don't get.
Thank you, Sophie.
No worries.
Can I say to people listening in, we will have time for a couple more questions right at the very end. If you'd like to send your questions in again for those, that'd be great. We're still having more questions on Yammer, Chris, so I'll be coming back to you in a minute. But Steph, can I come to you now in terms of what advice would you like to share with people who are hoping to start a staff idea scheme?
Yeah, so the advice I'd give to anybody thinking about engaging staff, it's a bit of a no-brainer really, it's just do it, because you won't regret engaging your staff. But as I think Chris said, I think everybody said, it's very important to do something with those ideas. If you've roused staff, motivated, enthused, engaged staff, the worst thing you can do is not do anything. Once you've engaged staff and you perhaps let them down, it's doubly hard to engage them.
Yeah. I'm getting a very clear message that sort of there is a continuous feedback loop happening with the staff ideas. Oh, yeah. It's not a one-off occasion. It's consistent and constant. Beth, thank you. Stuart, can I come to you?
Yep. So I would say, as we said several times, it's understand, work with your existing culture. Don't try and use an idea scheme as a way to change the culture. Use it as a means to leverage the culture you already have. Yeah. Any solution you put in place, keep it simple. Don't just expect you can go and buy an IT system and drop it on the organisation, because you're probably going to fail and waste the money. And manage expectations. Don't say, I'm going to implement everything you give me. Be upfront and just say, we will assess what you give us. If it's feasible, we'll take it forward. If it's not, we will kill it straight away. And on that point as well, don't give a time scale. Don't say I'm going to implement everything in 90 days, because there are some things which take a long time to fully assess, plan, develop, and then implement. I've had one idea that came into us for one of my predecessors, and actually I think it may have been the first person to run our idea scheme when it became one team, which took 12 years from submission to implementation. And that's because it dealt with the railways in Europe. Because of legislation controlling railways, every country which that carriage could go to without being lifted off the tracks had to have input into what was going on, and midway through there was a change in legislation, so everything went back to the starting point. So sometimes it does take much longer than people expect.
And that's it, managing expectations. HSBC, you think how many departments there are, you think, oh, I'll forward it to this person. Sorry, no, you've got to forward it to that one, to this one. And then, you know, you could end up being there for months. So as long as the guys know that we've got your idea, we're working on it, transparency, then again, you don't restrict yourself to any sort of time frame. But as long as you have a time frame to which you respond to the person submitting that question, at least then they know what's going on. It's not just drop down a hole.
And for us with the scheme, the supporting system that we have, it's open to staff 24/7. They can go on, they can see where their idea is in the process. They can also have a look at any comments which have been added to it, and then at the end of the process, they've got complete transparency. So everybody who's touched their idea, they will see by name and what their contribution was to the idea as well.
Wow, that's quite powerful, isn't it? Really. Chris, before I come to you on the Yammer question, folks, we've got time for a couple more questions before we come to the end of our hour. Chris, there's been a lot of traffic about Yammer in terms of sort of what the benefits of it. Have you seen? I know it's been piloted at the moment. But have you seen any actual benefits of having Yammer engaging with staff on an internal basis?
Just so there are other platforms available.
Of course,
that just happens to be the one we.
It would be rude of me not to mention the fact there are other platforms available.
Just to say, testing some of the ideas. Some specific ones. There was a specific topic someone asked me some questions about. In fact, it was rattling around email. I took the conversation off email, dropped it into Yammer, and where there were just 3 of us talking about it, I think ended up with 12 people joined the conversation. And for that specific topic, the knowledge that came in and people's direct experience, where the 3 of us have been asking and postulating about what might or might not happen and where could we get it. Someone actually joined the conversation, said, I've done that. I've been there, I took part in this, here's the evidence, and by the way, here's something they wrote about it in a national newspaper. And it was sort of all of that happened straight away, jumped all of the agony they might have gone through in trying to work out something, and it was very quick. It was very almost uncontrolled, but we got to an answer within the space of 24 hours. So I said, yeah, direct benefit. We haven't quantified it, but we could sit back and say if the three of us had gone off, done research, tried things, there would have been hours of cost doing it, and that one person already done it. So yeah, direct benefits.
Stuart, I'm coming with you with a bit of a killer question. It's kind of similar question we've actually had. When change is expected to take such a long time, the measuring of success in the short term, how do you maintain the sort of the motivation on that?
So the bits which take the most time are generally end up being massive formal projects. Right. So the one that I mentioned became part of our infrastructure and equipment team. So the full project team was set up, funded, financed, and they took through that idea as part of the wider work they were doing on the railways this year as well. You do find that with those ones, they do become part of business as usual, so it then becomes quite obvious what's happening, what's going on, either from the comms from that project team or through equipment and changes to process which are being delivered as things move forward.
Quick wins as well, that's the important thing. Little ideas as well as big ideas.
I would like to say now, we're just coming up to the hour now, so I would like to say thank you very much to all our panel members who, for their contributions. They're much appreciated. For those who are listening in, I would just very much like to say thank you very much for all your questions, much appreciated. So just to remind you, this webinar has been recorded and you'll have it in a number of different versions. There'll be an MP3 file for the total hour. There'll be 4 separate MP3 files for each question, and we're now going to conduct a very short sort of video so we can share that as well. Can I say thank you very much? Diolch yn fawr am amser. Pnawn da I chi. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you. This is Ina Lloyd signing off on behalf of the Good Practice team of the Wales Audit Office, and I'd like to say thank you very much to Sophie from Ideas UK for coming along and helping us host this.
No worries.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.